So now we're going to talk about actually installing mechanically the inverters onto rails. These are iron ridge rails, and the thing here is just to know that the panels are going in landscape mode, so they're going to go widthwise across here, and then the width of these panels happens to be 40 inches. Most 60 cell panels are approximately 40 inches wide. So start from the end and measure up 40 inches, and then add a little bit, a ½ inch, for the fact that the end clamp down there is not going to allow the panel to go all the way to the end, and then mark the boundary of the first panel with P. Okay? Now, inverters we're going to try to put roughly centered in the panels. So that means that 20 inches from there we'll add a mark for the inverter. So at this point right here we'll put an I to indicate inverter, so that will be an inverter location point. 20 inches from there will be the edge of the panel, so P again. This is just a rough indicator. It's not hard and fast, because in the end what will happen here is that the panels will obviously self-align as they get installed, but the idea is to form markings for where to put these things. So you can see here we've got a drop right at the location where an inverter should go. Another 20 inches up from the edge of a panel, I'll mark an I, and 20 inches from there will be the location of the edge of another panel, so P, and then in another 20 inches we'll mount an inverter, I, and then the last panel, the top of the panel, will go at the top of the rail, like that, up there. Okay? So now we'll switch to actually physically mounting the inverter on a rail. Now, when actually choosing the final placement of an inverter, or of all the inverters actually to mount, the LED is something that should be considered. We marked out this rail just as one of the possible locations, but this rail's also been marked, and so I want to show you a pitfall of installing on this rail versus this rail. And the issue would be that the LED location, if you went here, would be facing down the slope in this particular site, and these panels will be the last thing, that's installed here, and the panels will be installed from the bottom up, and the PV connections will be made one by one as they're installed, and so the installers will be uphill sliding the panels. Then we'll clip these. That won't be that bad, but then they won't be able to see the LED blinking unless they come underneath and look up. So a better location is this side. Now both of these locations, notice that the inverter is getting mounted upright, and upright is indicated by the label. It's also indicated by the mounting, the grounding bracket here, which in this particular installation we won't be using. We'll be using weeb to do grounding. So we're going to go on this side because it has the advantage of having the LED be uphill, so that later if the installer wants to look down the entire length, there will be 4 panels going here, so there'll be 4 inverters installed. It's possible to look at these LEDs and see them providing their status information that everything's nominal. Once the installation is finalized and everything's moved to the gateway inside, then looking at LEDs becomes not very interesting, because there's so much more information that's coming from the gateway. But when the wiring is being done and everything's being checked out, it's actually nice to get the LED visual confirmations. So next step is to take the 1/4 inch bolt, slide it down the rail, and come to your mark that you've made before. These are on 20 inch centers offset from the edge of the panel boundaries. The weeb connector goes right over the bolt and locks in place. It's fairly loose, it's not a tight lock at that point. And then the inverter will go right on top at this point. So go here, put your flat washer there, locking washer, and then nut, and just crank it down. This is a 7/16 driver here. Now, Weeb recommends 10 foot-pounds, which means you're going to have 10 pounds of force at 1 foot on here. You can get a torque wrench to measure that as well. That's advisable. Also to do continuity checks on these once they're done. So in a moment we'll do a continuity check and show that this is actually grounded.